got an email recently from someone who had looked at my blog and wanted to know what they should do when their agent is not communicating with them about their new book and why they don't have any feedback yet after 2 or 3 months. My name is Michael Carr. I'm with Veritas Literary Agency, and this is How to Hook an Agent. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what you should do when you have a secret agent. So I call a secret agent someone who is non-communicative. You have no idea what they're doing. Maybe they've gone out on submission and they're not giving you any feedback as to what's going on with that. Maybe they're just passing along. I sent it to 6 editors. 2 have rejected it, but you don't have any names or anything like that. It could be they're in contract negotiations and you're really in the dark about any of that sort of thing. For some reason, it gets to be a point where there's a major problem developing, and this is when people have contacted me in the past. Some of these are writers who I've known. Some of them have found me via my blog, or they met me at a conference. I get asked this sometimes at conferences. I've even had people sign up for a pitch session, and then when the pitch session comes, they say, well, I really don't want to talk to you about my book. I want to talk to you about this agenting situation, and maybe you can shed some light on it. It's a very, very strange sort of a situation. And it's unfortunately common. I think there are multiple reasons why this can happen. They're not usually, none of them really are a good sign for what your relationship is like with that person. One thing that happens sometimes is people sign with agents who are super new and are in over their head, and they really don't know how to handle, they don't know how to be professional, or worse than that, they're in and they realize that they're not actually making a living at it, and they're going to drop out. A fairly small percentage of agents that you're going to run into are in this category. Brand new, not going to last very long. Unfortunately, those people also have a disproportionate number of clients. When I started off myself, I signed a lot of people who were maybe marginal, and I didn't sell their books. And in part because you're new, you don't have enough work yet, you're taking on some projects and giving it a try. I don't necessarily regret that phase, but I will say that it's something that goes away quickly, because pretty soon you have to focus on those clients you already have who are producing and getting contracts and that sort of thing. So it's normal to sign at a much higher rate when you're starting off, at the same time that you have a lower quality of overall submission because you're not as well known and people have not seen you out there in the industry. So a newer agent might have signed 10 or 15 or even 20 new writers and quickly realize that they're not selling. Nothing's quick in this business. So let's say slowly realizing they have the dawning realization that nothing's actually working out. And so unfortunately, I don't know why this is, but a lot of people, not just in agenting, but in other aspects of the industry and in life in general, they are so averse to conflict that instead of coming right out and admitting what the situation is, they just go dark. So there's a chance, if your agent has gone dark and has become your secret agent, that what has happened is they are transitioning out of the industry. And I would say, especially if they're a newer agent, this is a possibility. Another kind of agent who will go dark, and I've mentioned elsewhere on this channel that as I work as a writer myself and have gone through some of these struggles as well under my pen name, that I had an agent early on that didn't work out, and I actually had 2 agents before I signed with a 3rd agent who ended up selling my book. And the first agent was a really big name agent. It's, I believe, 13 or 14 years maybe since I signed with her, and she's still in the business. She works, she does well. I think she has some long term clients, and she seems to be a very good agent who makes a really good living at it. Undoubtedly makes a lot more money than I do based on having an office in New York and some of the clients that I see she has. I signed with her even though I had, I believe, three other offers, in part because she was a big name agent. Again, this is a decision you need to make. The answer is not always right as to who you should sign with, but in this case, I signed with a big name agent. When I met her, she threw out a number of $600,000 for an auction for this book. That obviously never happened, but she went out, she got a really good list of people. It took a long time to go out on submission. That drove me a little bit crazy, but 6 months later, when we finally went out after a light revision and a lot of time sitting on the manuscript, we went out, she got a good list of people, big names out there. They gave some feedback. I had at least one person request a rewrite. She didn't want to pursue that, which was kind of a sign for me. And then when I sent in my next book, she just, didn't respond to that. And I think that this category of agent is someone who is legitimately in the business, but then ghosts you if your book hasn't sold. So if this is like your second book and your first one didn't sell and the agent seems to be legit, you might be getting ghosted. I'm sorry to say that. It's unfortunate, and I can kind of understand why. It's for the same reason that I rarely give feedback anymore to just to unsolicited queries. It's because a lot of people then react badly to that. So if you tell someone, and I've had to do that unfortunately myself, I'm unable to sell your book. I don't think I can sell this book either. Maybe you should find someone else who can work better with you. That's no matter how delicately you phrase that, it's never a great conversation, and the other person is never happy to hear that. So I think some people, rather than just do that, just stop responding and wait for the person to go away. It's a problem. There are other situations where people run into serious difficulty. I had an editor who stopped responding to a submission. We had gone out on submission, had gone through a request for rewrite. The writer and the editor had serious conversations about this, and then I sent in the revised manuscript and never heard back. Well, it turned out there were some family health issues related to COVID, and unfortunately, they never resolved themselves before we went on and found another editor to acquire that book. But there was a reason, and so you really can't rule that out. Again, it would have been better if I had received the email that said, sorry, I'm really going through tough times. I'll try to get back to you by this date, and then hearing back from the editor if that didn't happen. But unfortunately, you can't count on that. Now, let's go to the other category, and that is an agent who seems to really be legitimately working for you. And I'm going to leave out these weird cases where I've sometimes heard where agents have claimed to go on submission, and then the writer later finds out that the whole thing was just fabricated. I don't know what's going on there, but where your agent is just not very communicative, and you send in your manuscript and you never hear that they even have it, let alone getting feedback in any sort of timely fashion. This is the publishing industry, and people are busy. So when I say timely fashion, I'm not saying within a week, right? But if you send in your manuscript and a month goes by with nothing, not even, I'm going to get to this as soon as possible, that's a problem. I don't know why it is, at that point, it seems to be a lot easier for someone to reach out to, say, me or other people to complain and ask for advice than to go ahead and try to establish contact with the agent. Don't be afraid to escalate if you're not getting feedback from someone you're working with professionally. I'm not talking about unsolicited stuff at this point, right? I'm not even talking about when someone has requested your manuscript. It's appropriate in that case to politely ask for an update if they've been sitting on it for a couple of months. Nobody's going to be bothered by that. But if you've got a professional relationship with someone and you're not getting the level of communication that you need, it's time to have a frank conversation. And it may be that your agent just doesn't want to work at that level. Most agents and their writers have a fairly close relationship where they're bouncing ideas off each other. And I mean, some people will send me pictures of their trip to Iceland or whatnot, and that's the sort of relationship that I have with a lot of my writers, but not all of them. But there are some who are going to be so strictly professional that you're just never going to know anything about their personal life. They're never going to know anything about yours, and they're going to respond at whatever pace they feel like they can respond at. That might not work for you. It's important to know that that might not work for you. You may need to have specific feedback about what you're getting submitted to, who you're submitting to. You may need to have an agent who gets back to you with input about your writing within a couple months, not 6 months later, right? I would say most writers are going to really be pretty antsy if they haven't got feedback on their new manuscript in 6 months, if it's not out on submission already, along those lines. So why do people not want to talk to their agent in that situation? Well, the answer is obvious. They're afraid of pissing off the agent and getting dumped. There's an unequal balance of power in this industry. I feel it when I'm dealing with editors, and a lot of writers feel it when they're dealing with agents. At some point, when your career is so big that you can choose whoever you want, that you could get a new agent in 15 minutes, if you so desired, then the situation will be different. But the fact of the matter is at the unsold stage or the very small contract stage, you need your agent more than your agent needs you. And if they don't feel like you're pulling your weight financially, they might put you on the back burner. I hope not. In my case, I try to realistically treat my writers the same. I mean, I have a couple of six-figure writers out there, and obviously I need to just jump right on their manuscripts when they come in. But really, I try to give people priority in the order in which they come up in the queue and the urgency of whatever they need from me. But a lot of agents don't work that way, and there are some high-powered agents. If someone is representing someone who is getting $1 million contracts, and your contract is $5,000, you probably are going to an assistant. But that might mean that that person's not right for you. And I have to say, if you're unhappy with your agent, or you feel like your agent is a bad agent who is not submitting, a bad agent is worse than having no agent. If you have a bad agent who's not going out on submission with your books, you really don't have an agent. If you have an agent like I had, where I had an editor, someone who was capable of laying down $50,000 or $100,000 for a book, asking me for a rewrite, and my agent said, in my experience, those never pan out, which I can tell you is bunk. I just this last week got a contract for a rewrite, a contract offer for a rewrite of a middle grade novel that had gone through extensive revisions on the editor's request. But I do accept that it doesn't always happen that way. Frequently, you just get rejected in a more painful way. But from my point of view, I didn't have an agent because I needed that agent to represent me with that editor. I couldn't go back to that editor on my own. And my book had fizzled out, and my agent wasn't willing to go out with other submissions because she didn't see a point in seeking out smaller contracts. For me, I happily would have. Now, that book has since gone on to do pretty well. So I'm happy with how things turned out. But at the time, it was frustrating. And when I sent in my next book and she just didn't appear to have read past the second chapter, then, and it was not quite a breakup, but I pretty much got that sense from her email. That was pretty much the end of it. So if you're good enough to get an agent in the first place, you can get us another agent. If it was a fluke and you probably shouldn't have signed with that agent, probably shouldn't have signed you in the first place, but made a mistake, because we sometimes do make a mistake based on personal preferences or misunderstanding of what the industry wants at that point, and you can't get another agent, then there's a really good chance you weren't ready. But in any event, that secret agent you have is so secretive that they're not getting your book contracts and they're not doing the work for you they need to have. And so you need to get rid of the secret agent and look for a real one.